I am Tracy Stark James, the Executive Director for the Riverhead Industrial Development Agency. This is my colleague Dawn Thomas. She is the Director of the Riverhead Community Development Agency. We're a small team here in Riverhead, but we pack a big punch. I'd first like to start the afternoon with thanking Bridgehampton National Bank for sponsoring the luncheon, and Stark Media Group for streaming us today. Yes, we are being taped, so be careful what you say. We have provided some information in the brochures that are on your tables to kick off your creative thinking to investing and developing in Riverhead. But we welcome the opportunity to work with you more closely, bringing your vision to reality in Riverhead. Riverhead offers tremendous opportunity. Get it? As you will see, our Opportunity Zone designation covers a large area, offering diverse zoning to advance almost any industry type. So please reach out to us during your infancy stage to brainstorm so that we can provide guidance, help you navigate through this wonderful governmental maze, and to package any other incentives that may be available. However, if Riverhead cannot accommodate your needs, for some reason, we will further assist you to seek opportunities close by in our neighboring communities as we look at economic development as a regional effort that benefits all of us. Allow me to introduce my fellow colleagues from the towns of Brookhaven and Islip. Bill Mannix from the town, sorry Bill, I'll go to Lisa. Lisa Mulligan from the town of Brookhaven IDA, she's the CEO over there. Jim Tullo is Deputy Director of the Industrial Development Agency. Bill Mannix is the CEO of the Islip IDA, and his deputy, John Walter from Islip IDA. We work together to find the best homes for you to do business in. We ultimately want you to invest and grow in New York, on Long Island, but in Suffolk County. Of course, Riverhead first. The township's maps are displayed as well, and Brookhaven is having this same presentation tomorrow at a breakfast. They don't have limited seating, so if you get overwhelmed today and you want to see it again, or you have colleagues that you think might be interested in this program, please invite them and register tonight so they can see you tomorrow. I would also like to take this time to introduce my board, the Riverhead Industrial Development Agency. Not with us today is a new board member, James Farley, and board member Anthony Barisi, and a last minute due to illness is our vice chair, Lori Ann Pitchinsky. But we do have our treasurer, Bob Kern. Please stand, Bob. He's also the president of the Riverhead Chamber of Commerce. And our esteemed chairman, Tom Crusoe. I just want to take a moment to say how very lucky I am to be guided by such astute leaders in our community. They are extremely dedicated and uncompensated, I might add. They put the best interest of the town first, and many times in the face of opposition. So let's give them a good round of applause, please. Thank you. We also have our town leaders here ready to support and expedite your initiatives.
Good afternoon and welcome to the zone. This is actually, we're physically in the Opportunity Zone right at this moment while we're speaking. We have our town leaders, and first I'd like to introduce Councilwoman Jody Giglio. Catherine Kent. Our first ever female supervisor for the town of Riverhead, the Honorable Laura Jen Smith. And with that, we're going to introduce Laura, do some welcoming remarks, and we're going to do a little audio-visual just before that.
Thank you, Dawn and Tracy. Yep, I will wait. Well, they're pulling that up. Welcome to Riverhead, everybody. I hope you've all had an opportunity. I know it's many familiar faces here, but for those of you who are not familiar faces, I hope on your way in town you have an opportunity to take a drive around, take a look at our downtown, take a look at Route 58, our regional shopping area. and also EPCAL, the former Grumman site, which we have recently entered into a contract for sale, which is also part of the Opportunity Zone. Yep, go ahead. This is just a brief overview of what we have to offer.
On Long Island's East End, right here in Riverhead. And while I moved away, I keep coming back to the place where friends and family come together year after year. Where generations of farmers and fishermen have sparked a fresh new crop of restaurants and breweries, vineyards and farm stands. Where local is the only way to be. These days, my family and I are discovering a whole new Riverhead, where old charm melds together with a new energy, offering something for everyone. A vibrant Main Street with shops, museums, a theater, an aquarium, and even a water park. I love being here. You never really leave a place you love. And Riverhead is always in my heart.
I think a couple words in there really sum it up. It's old charm and new energy. And that's exactly who we are, and that's exactly what we're hoping that you'll take away from today's presentation. We were designated as an Opportunity Zone this past year, and we're the largest swath of land on Long Island that was dedicated to the Opportunity Zone. So you can see the potential that we have here and the commitment not only at the local level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level to help us succeed in our town here and to help work with you to be able to do that. The Opportunity Zone allows you to invest not only in the needed housing that we need here on Long Island and to grow and create your business here on Long Island, but I also think that one thing we forget a lot about is job opportunity. One of the things that to be a sustainable Long Island and remain a sustainable Long Island, we need to not only create the housing and the retail, but we also need to start to attract in the investment for job growth, whether it's a startup, whether it's high tech, whether it's in the food industry, but all of these opportunities are here. And we know, if we've learned nothing else about millennials, that they're a difficult audience to attract. And what we're finding with them is they come to an area because they like an area and then they look for their jobs. And I don't think there's any better place on Long Island to attract millennials. We are 20 minutes from the ocean. We are a few minutes from the Long Island Sound. We are right on the Peconic River. We have farmland. We have great shopping. We have restaurants. We have tourism. We have just about everything that somebody is looking for, really in a microcosm of a community. And in many ways, Riverhead also has so much potential for development because while we're not designated, we really are almost a mini city here. We have our own water, we have our own sewer, and we have our own police department. So many things that when you invest in other areas, you're having to deal with other entities. Many of them are located right here in Riverhead. And you also have a town board that's really eager to work with you and help develop your opportunity here, along with our Community Development Agency and our Industrial Development Agency. So I hope you enjoy this presentation, and I look forward to speaking with you and helping your success be our success here in Riverhead. So thank you.
I'd like to introduce our speakers for this afternoon's presentation. First, we have Paul Kurtzman, CPA JD. He's a tax partner at Anshin, co-practice leader for Anshin's Tax Credits and Incentives Group, which assists companies in identifying and receiving local, state, and federal tax incentives and credits. He assists companies to maximize their economic development incentives and enabling them to receive benefits which can reduce and eliminate the company's tax liability. Paul is a member of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants, the United States Tax Court, and is a member of the Board of Directors of the Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Development Group. Oh, he's doing his AV, I'm sorry. And then I'll introduce Bill Weir. He's an experienced tax-exempt, he's experienced in tax-exempt bond financing, commercial real estate, secured lending, general corporate and tax advice. His principal areas of practice include bond counsel work in connection with industrial development revenue bonds, local development corporation bonds, civic facility revenue bonds, college and university bonds, solid waste resource recovery bonds, hospital and healthcare bonds, and other exempt facility bonds, multifamily housing bonds, continuing care retirement community bonds, assisted living facility bonds, and affordable housing bonds and general obligation bonds. I think that's a good amount of bonds. And then I think we will begin with our presentation.
Can you hear me? So, first of all, I want to thank Riverhead, Richie, and everyone for having us here today. It's also an honor for me to be back in my hometown of Riverhead. I grew up in the town of Riverhead, so it's a real pleasure to be back here. The opportunities in Paul's CPA, I'm an attorney. This program is a lot of tax driven by the tax code. So here I'm going to kind of go back and forth on more the accounting side and then the legal side. And so hopefully I don't get you guys lost through this presentation. But so what are opportunity zones and why were they created? And it goes back to the tax reform bill that was passed last year. Right around this time, we're in the middle of it. This was introduced by several senators and congressmen. The idea of using tax code for incentives for things that Congress wants to see happen. Tax code is replete with examples of this. But in this program, Congress decided we need economic development, investment, revitalization in low-income areas. Now, the federal government could do it. That costs a lot of money. Or they can give the private sector an incentive to make those investments. And that's really what this is. This is a tax code-driven economic incentive to have private investors invest in low-income areas around the country to help those areas. And the goal is to have employment, but also investing in those communities, building up the tax base. You start building buildings in those areas, not only can people work there in those businesses, but you're going to build up the tax base for the local municipalities so they can provide the services that they would have to provide. So again, hopefully less for federal sector. So that's the overall plan. One of the things they looked at, there is approximately $1.6 trillion of appreciated property in New York, in the United States. And so if people were selling those assets, they have money that they can invest into these type of projects. One of the important things that they're looking at here is you're taking capital gains from the sale of any property. It doesn't have to be real estate. It could be stock. It could be sale of a business that you would normally pay capital gains on. And you can take that money, invest it in these opportunity zones, and we'll go through how you do that. And the idea is that you're going to defer payment of that money and have a reduction in what you owe. So there is a real incentive to do this. It's like most things Congress puts in, not that easy to do, a lot of steps, but the idea is you're going to have investment in these low-income areas that will hopefully achieve the goals that Congress wants. One of the important things is it can be any type, sale of any type of asset that you would normally pay capital gains on. And then you're going to invest it in property or a business in these zones. So unlike a 1031 exchange, it's not a like-kind exchange. Now I'm stealing a little false thunder. But again,
As long as you don't steal my joke.
no, I won't say your joke. But again, so just remember, as Paul goes into this, you can sell stock and put it into real estate. You can sell one type of real estate and put it to another. So it's really critical that you keep that in mind, that it's not a 1031 like kind of exchange. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Bill. Okay. So, as Bill said, this has been a very hot topic. Interestingly enough, I gave a presentation on this yesterday morning to about 150 accountants, mostly CPAs, and I started out off by asking a question just to the room for a show of hands as to how many accountants in the room felt that they were really experts on opportunity zones. And I got like one hand go up. And then I said, well, okay, the rest of you, how many have at least, maybe gone to a presentation on this, maybe watched a webinar, read something about it, done a little digging on it? About a third of the room raised their hands. And I said, okay, the rest of you, how many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? And I got probably another third. The third didn't even want to raise their hand. So this is something that came out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2017. And I was quite honest. I said, not to be embarrassed, if I went back 8 months, I would have been in that third category of not knowing anything about what this was. Because it was one of the sleepers in the change in the law. It was one of the things people weren't talking about until really when all the areas had to get designated by the governors, and that really took place starting in April. But from that point on, this thing's really snowballed, and you can't really pick up a business journal or even just newspaper, and you'll see something on someone saying they're opening a $300 million opportunity zone fund or launching this or launching that. Like most of the things that came out under that Tax Act at the end of 17, it was done with such haste. If you remember, in the news media where they were holding up the bill with handwritten changes at the last minute, so much of it was done so hastily, it wasn't vetted properly, and they really didn't think through the ramifications, that there were a lot of open questions, and that really held people back from launching a lot of these funds and making a lot of these investments. And even though it's the law of the land, and it's enacted, it's within its time run has begun, not a lot of funds have really been formed unless they're really straight down the fairway, project that was going to happen anyway, and it just happens to be in the right location and was able to move forward. Pretty much nothing else has gone forward at this point. Again, the reason being because there are a lot attorneys have been very hesitant to write agreements because there are just too many unknowns out there, too many clauses that you really have to take into account. We finally did get some proposed regs at the end of October, which had been promised in May. And the most interesting thing that came out of the proposed regs, although it did answer some of the questions, was a statement basically saying we're going to get a second set of proposed regs, hopefully by the end of the year. So we'll see when we get those. And just one point on, Bill made an important statement about capital gains being what you're going to put into these things. So one of the questions when the proposed regs came in, a lot of people were asking, well, what if I don't have capital gains? What if I just want to invest in one of these properties? Can I still get some of the benefits? And the statute didn't really seem to indicate that, but it really wasn't clear. And you would think if the intent was to get development and jobs and capital investment into these quote-unquote distressed areas, that you would take any money that would come in and give them some of the benefits. But the proposed regs were very clear that it has to be capital gain. So even if you did a 1031 exchange, as Bill mentioned, and you wanted to put all of your proceeds in, you couldn't. If you sold your Amazon stock and wanted to put all of your proceeds in, you can put in those other monies, but you're not going to get any of the benefits that are allotted to the Opportunity Zone program. And the reason really for that is, they were looking at this trillion plus of capital gains that are sitting on the sidelines of unrealized gains. They're using that as a way of paying for this program, because ultimately taxes will be paid, there'll be a deferral, but ultimately they're causing people to pay those taxes in 2026, as we'll get into, so that revenue is going to pay for the benefits. So they only want capital gains to be invested in this program. I think we lost the slides. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The slides that were referred to are in it's the green thing. If you follow that, you can follow it.
Oh, everybody's got it. Great. So then we don't look at the slides. So I guess we're on page 3.
Yeah.
So again, there's two sides to this. There is the investor, and then there is, the fund. So we'll talk about the benefits, the incentives for being an investor. And so again, initially it's a deferral on capital gains, right? And you can postpone, so if you sell something now, you can get a postponement for up to 8 years, and it's up to 8 years because there's a statutory date, which is the same date for a lot of the things under that tax law, of 2026, when a lot of things end. So 2026, you're going to pay some tax on that original gain that was deferred, right? Hopefully not the entire amount, if you stay in it for the right amount of years, but you can get deferral initially, and if you're in for enough years, you will pay tax on something in 2026, right? Or earlier if you sell it earlier, right? So the quick example on this, right? We have somebody who sold their stock for $1 million, right? Or rather, they had basis of $1 million, and they sold it for $5 million. So that's a $4 million capital gain that would normally be paid. You sold it in 18, you pay the tax when you file your tax return for 2018, right? So if you take that $4 million of gain, just a gain, and invests cash equal to that in a qualified opportunity fund, when she files her tax return for 18, you file a form, and you have that form, we can show you what that form is, and basically delay paying the tax. So you wouldn't pay the tax in 2018, even though you recognize the gain in 2018. And so we go on to the next slide. So now, again, the goal of the program was, unlike some prior programs, we want people to invest in these programs for the long term. So the longer you stay in the program, the better the benefits you're going to get. So if you stay in that investment in the qualified fund in the zone for a period of 5 years, right, you will get a 10% increase on your basis. So initially, because you've deferred the gain, you basically have no basis in that investment, right? After 5 years, you get a 10% of your deferred gain becomes basis for you. So effectively, 10% of your deferred gain goes away, right? If you stay in for another 2 years, so now you've been in it for 7 years, another 5% goes away, right? You get another 5% of basis, so effectively 15% has gone away. Let's look at an example. So again, we have that gain of $4 million, which occurred in November of 18, right, which was then invested in a qualified opportunity fund, right, at zero basis. If we sold it the next year in 2019, then all you've done is gotten a 1-year deferral, right? And you'd have to pay tax on that full gain in the year that you pulled out of that investment, right? If instead she stayed in it for 5 years and then came out, so 2023, then the basis gets a 10% step up, so on $4 million, it's $400,000. And then if she then pulled out of the fund, right, so now she's got to recognize that gain, but $400,000 of it would have gone away, right? And in 2025, we get another 5% of step up, which in this case is another $200,000. Right? Now, 2026, remember, that's the statutory date where regardless of when you went into the fund, you're going to pay the tax on your deferred gain. But the deferred gain in 2026, if she was in the fund since 2018, she's now been in for 7 years, or 8 years actually, so 15% of that gain went away by giving her that additional basis. So now it's $4 million less that 15%. So it's only $3.4 million that actually gets taxed in 2026. So that's really the second benefit. The first benefit is just you don't pay the tax in the year that you had the recognition event. The second benefit is you're getting you're getting an increase in basis, and effectively 10 or 15% of your original gain actually goes away. So if we go on to slide 5, if we stay in the investment, so let's assume 2026 comes around, you have to pay, in our example, the tax on the $3.4 million gain. So let's assume you have other funds and you pay the gain, the tax from other funds, and you don't pull out of the investment. So now, if you're able to stay in that investment for a 10-year period, remember by 2026, in our example, we were in it for 8, we stay in it for 10 years, and now, when you come out of that investment, right, after 10 years, as long as before 2047, so you can stay in it for quite a while, the law allows you to step up your basis to fair market value when you come out of that investment. So what that means, and we'll look at the example, right? Remember we had a gain of $4 million, which we got step-ups in after 5 years and 7 years. And now let's say in 2030, right, we come out of the fund, and she gets, in this example, $10 million for that investment. Remember, she put in $4 million, paid tax on $3.4, And now, 2030, in the example, she comes out of that investment, and the fair market value is $10 million. She steps up her basis in that asset, in that investment, to $10 million. That's the cash she got. Well, then there's no gain. No additional gain gets reported. So that's the real benefit, is this third benefit. If you pick the right investment, after 10 years, when you come out of that investment, no additional taxes paid. So effectively, all you've ever paid, in this example, is 85% of the original gain. No incremental increase on your investment, no tax, as long as you stay in it for a 10-year period. Right, is that clear? Now, in the second example, it's a little tricky here. Right, same facts, except that in December 2030, the fund itself sold the property for the same price. Well, the law says, at least the way that we read the law right now, based on the proposed regs, that the investor, in order to make the step up, has to basically come out of the fund, has to take out their investment. If the fund itself has a gain, well, that's like any other taxable gain, and it's going to flow through. So one of the issues that we're still grappling with is, methods of divestiture, because, when you go into, you don't necessarily want everybody leaving your fund at one time, so you need to take that into consideration, and I'm sure Bill will get more into issues such as that, but you have to be aware that you have, under the current law, we believe you have to actually come out of the investment. All right. To get the step up to fair market value after the 10-year period, you have to come out of the investment. Or at least you have to have some kind of recognition event, what that right is. It can't just be within the fund selling the property. Right? So we have a little example here, a little chart, how it actually works. So it just shows the same flow, right? In 2018, we sold the property, generating an original gain. And then within 180 days of that recognition event, you have to take cash equal to that gain. Doesn't have to be the same cash. So unlike a like-kind exchange, no tracing the proceeds, no middleman. If it was a phantom gain from some investment, you take any cash and put it into that fund with 180 days, and you have a zero basis because you've gotten a deferral on the capital gain. After 5 years, as you can see in this example, 10% of the deferred gain goes away. After 7 years, another 5% goes away. 2026, very clearly you pay the tax on the original gain, but at the stepped-up basis if you've been in it for 7 years. And then anytime after the 10-year period, you can step up to fair market value and pay no additional tax. All right? And then we just have a sample investment on the next page. Same facts. Any taxpayer had a capital gain within a 180-day period. He has to contribute the gain to a qualified opportunity fund. Right? Again, he has zero basis in that fund, and he's invested $1 million in the fund. The fund has to go out and invest that $1 million in qualified opportunity zone property, and there are tests in terms of how much of their assets, and we're going to go into that, how much of the fund's assets actually have to be deployed within the opportunity zone. We go on to the next slide. So after 5 years, the taxpayer his investment in that fund is increased by 10%. So in this example, from 0 to 100. After 7 years, another 5%, so now it's up to 150. And then 2026, again, so his gain is now really 850, and that's what he pays tax on. After 10 years, in the example, in this example, he sells it for $2 million. The basis is stepped up to $2 million, fair market value, and the effect being no tax on that $2 million when it comes out.
So, if you look at the funds, the opportunity zones are 25% of the state's low-income communities as designated by census tracts. And the law said to the states, you can take pretty much arm's length transaction. You can't go buy it from your brother-in-law or your wife or your father. It's got to be unrelated parties. During substantially all of the holding period, substantially all of the use is in the opportunity zone, and original use commences with taxpayer, or the taxpayer substantially improves the property during any 30-month period after acquisition. In addition to the basis exceeded amount equity to be adjusted to the property, as we talked about. And then persons or entities that can receive capital gains, who can invest. Anybody who has capital gains or can receive capital gains. Pass-through entities, partnerships, S corporations can invest, or as partners or shareholders can invest. This may enable a longer than 188 timetable to invest. Again, it's something you want to set up with the accountants and tax lawyers. Then leverage and liquidity. The investor can borrow money to make the investment and pledge interest in the funds as collateral. That's particularly important where you have the phantom income, where you don't actually have cash from sale of something, but you have the tax liability. So you go down to the bank, take out a loan, and pledge your interest. And the fund can borrow money to develop the project. Just don't forget that. And then there's other opportunities, because again, these are in areas that are low-income areas. So you have opportunities to pair these investments, depending on the type of project, with other financing and tax sources, such as low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits, historic tax credits. You may also be eligible for tax-exempt bond financing. So if you were building a factory that could get tax-exempt bond financing, or if you were building an affordable housing project, or some of the senior assisted living facilities that qualify for 501c3 or other forms of tax-exempt bond financings. Tracy talked about the Riverhead IDA or the Brookhaven IDA. They can give you real property tax abatements going forward, sales and use tax exemptions on your construction, as well as partial mortgage recording tax exemptions. And for a lot of the IDAs here on Long Island, under their uniform tax exemption policies or their UTEPs, they tend to offer enhanced abatements in low-income areas. So again, something where you want to bootstrap as many different programs as you can into this type of project. You can also get certain tax savings, and again, this is really more Paul's bailiwick than mine, for service providers who get a tax-free promote or interest treatment. Sometimes what you see, it's also known as a deferred developer's fee, where they may say, I won't take a developer's fee, but I'm a 1% general partner, but if we sell after 10 years, my equity interest will be treated at, say, 5% or 10%. So again, it's a really tricky area. The rules haven't come out, but people are looking at that.
And it probably works better if the promoter is actually putting in their own gain money as well.
Yes. Yeah. But you very well often will see that the developer or the promoter, normally they take it out as a developer's fee. Sometimes they call it deferred developer's fee. Some tax agreements allow you to convert it into equity as opposed to a fee. I'm not sure how the IRS is going to view that yet, but people are looking at it. And then again, other opportunities, for say any, colleges, hospitals, so forth. Very often they're looking for developers to help build housing for either employees or students. A perfect opportunity for that. So how do you put a deal together? Well, first you got to have some gains. You want to find a developer who you're willing to work with, and that could either be your own yourself. And again, you're a real estate developer. You sold one project, you want to build another one, or you want to find somebody who you want to get into business with. But remember, this is a long-term play. This is not, you get out and construction's over, you're going to be holding here for 10 years. You want to find a business that wants to locate into a zone, or if they're already there, to expand in the zone. And you want to find an investor with capital gains. So you need those three to come together. But when you can come together, this could be a really good project for investors. With that, I think we'll turn it over to questions.
Hi, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. I'm Larry Oxton. I'm a commercial real estate broker in the area. I understand everything that you're saying from the investor's side. Is there any incentive for a property owner in the opportunity zone to sell? No.
Sure. You know, if you were to look at that property before the zone was created and after that zone was created, all of a sudden that property has a lot more value. This is for a developer who's going to come in and get these benefits. You know, if you could build, as I said, 2 identical projects, one south of Route 58, one north of Route 58, you're going to get better benefits as a developer south of Route 58 if you're in the zone. So where the incentive would be, if you own property in the zone and you were thinking of selling it, probably now's the time to put it up for sale and start looking for developers to take advantage of those benefits.
But is there any economic?
Well, then you sold it, and now you have a capital gain, and
You can invest in another project.
yeah, or take, you know, if you can take less than 20% and put it back into your own project, because now it's not a related party, and at least get a partial deferral on that as well.
Thanks for all the information. My name is Sharon May, and I own a company called Savoca Enterprises. I work with developers, specifically in the MWBE space in New York City primarily. The Opportunity Zone is a hot item. My question is regarding the census. I believe, if I know this, or been told this, is that the census map that was used to configure this program was use the 2010 census. How will it impact in 2020 when that census is redone?
Well, the statute said you had to take 25% of your low-income census tracts in the state, set the zones. Once the zones are set, they're set. So I don't think there'll be any impact by the 2020 census when it comes out in 21 or 22.
So question, just a clarification. So the total investment has to occur within 31 months? That's a safe harbor? So we have to get approvals and zoning and also construct the project all within that 31-month period?
You're not talking about the investment, you're talking about the development.
Yes.
So by the fund deploying, right. So you have to have a 31-month, if you have a 31-month plan, then the cash that you have doesn't get counted towards your, you don't have to meet that 90% test, so you can defer that. But you should have a 31-month plan, really, to really move your project forward. You can take a project in stages, potentially, also. Say, this is our plan for 31 months to spend this money. And then potentially have another phase after that, possibly with new money. Because you could have, if you have commitments from people for additional gains, or if you have additional gains yourself, you can continue to put money into the fund. You may not, one of the things that we're, statutorily, right now, you're going to pay tax in 2026. And the 5 and 7 year periods are set. So, unless they change the rules statutorily, the window for the deferral is going to get narrower. So if you first put in capital gains in 2022, then you can't get you can still defer until 2026, but you can't get that 10 and 5% step. You can still get the main gain, which is the 10 years, so that's really the main goal, but some of the other, it gets narrower as we get closer to 2026.
And some municipalities have pledged that they will try to the extent legally possible, expedite reviews and granting of permits and so forth in the zones, because they recognize, here they went and asked the state to create the zone for them. They need that to get through that process. So, again, you can't cut corners. You still got to plow with all the law, but you might get your pile, your project moves to the top of the pile. That's up to elected officials and government officials here, but, hopefully, they can expedite it,
If I buy a building in an opportunity zone for $2 million, and I take bonus depreciation and I write the building down to zero eventually, and I sell it in 10 years for the same $2 million and make no profit on the purchase price that I bought it for, is that recapture become free?
First of all, the bonus depreciation probably won't be applicable to the real property. Okay, but in theory, you can depreciate property, and maybe there's a lot of equipment that you did take bonus and write it down. So, there's different schools of thought on this. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are saying, yeah, you've gotten your losses, they can flow through to you, and then you step up if it's going to fair market value. And right now, there's nothing that says anything different. Again, there's still more guidance coming out on this, and, that may not have been the intent, but in a way, that's the way I read the statute right now.
Thanks.
Erwin Krasnow, Area Real Estate. If I sell a property in Nassau County and I 1031 it to buy a property in the Opportunity Zone in Riverhead, in 8 years, am I now going to have to pay taxes on 85% of my original gain if it's rolled through a 1031? Or will that be, well, normally a 1031 is basically deferred in perpetuity.
So you did a 1031, the property just happens to be in an opportunity zone?
No, I sold the property that's not an Opportunity Zone and I invested in an Opportunity
So
Zone.
you didn't do a 1031?
I did a 1031.
So then you're not recognizing any gain?
So then I won't, so then I can wait for the 10 years and I can basically get...
No. In order to get the opportunity zone benefits, you have to have a gain recognition event and take that gain and invest it in an opportunity zone.
That's why.
So I could pick up the income on the sale, not doing a 1031, and then roll it, and then purchase it in there. I'd be picking up the phantom income, which would then be due, 85% of that would be due in 8 years?
Correct.
Okay.